Thank you for listening to the Radio Maria podcast on the world family of Radio Maria stations.
Thank you so much for listening to the Radio Maria podcasts. It's thanks to listeners like you who donate that enable us to continue delivering quality content to listeners around the world. If you'd like to contribute and help us keep spreading the message of Our Lady's Son, please consider making a donation. You can reach us at 888-40-80201 or simply visit our donations tab on our website at radiomaria.us. Your generosity truly makes a difference.
Prodigal. Come on, let's get it. Yeah. Let's get it. Who ready to give it their all? Yeah. Come on, let's go. Ain't no time for no bullshit.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Mike Pantile Show, a show devoted to rebuilding authentic Catholic manhood, because the way that we reclaim the culture is by rebuilding the man. I'm your host, of course, Mike Pantile. What you're about to hear is the greatest marriage advice ever recorded on the internet, in the history of the internet. And I mean that. Dr. Peter Kraft was recently on the Pints with Aquinas show with Matt Fradd. And Matt Fradd asked him his greatest marriage advice. And this is what he said.
What advice? I know I've asked this, but I want to take another swing at it, give you another opportunity. What advice do you have someone watching this who's newly married or who is about to be?
Do you think that when you are very old and your wife is very old and ugly and wrinkled and fat and not very bright or even nasty, that you will still find her beautiful? If so, marry her. The last view I had of my wife in the nursing home, about an hour after she died, I fell in love with her again. Here is a wasted, emaciated, wrinkled, suffering body. It's as beautiful as a crucifix. Because that body ain't going to last, but the soul is. So if you don't love her soul, but just love her body, don't get married.
The first time I watched that, tears came to my eyes. In fact, it made my wife bawl. And I'm sure if you're listening or watching this, it tugged on your heartstrings, no matter how hard you are as a man. Because in that is the revealing and the unveiling of the metaphysical reality of the sacrament of matrimony. And it's so contra-cultural. It's so counter to this degenerate culture that we live in. You know, we're in this modern age that we live in. You know, love is reduced to, emotion. I fell out of love. I don't have butterflies anymore. It's all about chemistry or attraction or compatibility. But what happens when all that changes? Because we all end up in a place where there's sickness, there's old age, there's suffering, there's death, the frailty of humanity we confront. It's a reality. And if love can't survive that, was it really love to begin with? Fradd was reduced to tears, as I was, and most people who watch that, because I don't think we often think about that. We get so caught up in the mundaneness of the day-to-day life, the day-to-day swing of marriage, which a lot of times ends up being sort of like being in a glorified roommate situation instead of this human person that we are intimately united with in this indissoluble union in the church, in the eyes of God, that is inseparable because it's a unity of souls where two become one. The modern culture that we live in emphasizes these elaborate weddings, wedding planning, who's going to drink what or sit with who, what colors are we going to wear, where's the venue. The church is just merely a part of the big party that people pay upwards of thousands of dollars an hour for, only to wake up the very next day thinking and asking the question, maybe not audibly, of now what? Now we're married. Now it's the rest of our lives. Now what do we do with that? Without uniting it to Christ and understanding the sacrament, we get lost in the world. We don't understand the kind of love we need to be transmitting to one another. I mean, what is the family, the human family, but a sort of a comparative to the Holy Family or the Trinity, even more so, a communion of persons in love. And I've been there in my own marriage too, where you do the thing, you get married, and then you just entirely forget to love the person for the person who she actually is, or who he is if you're a woman. Caught up with work and with kids and with, building a life and building a future, instead of, existing in the blessing that is right now, because all of this is going to fade. All of this is going to decay. I haven't been married like Dr. Peter Krebs for 60 years. But I can certainly relate. His wife had passed away 2 weeks before this was recorded. And what you see in that man is this confrontation with the metaphysical reality of love. That there was almost like this inexplicable joy. Because although, his flesh, I'm sure he stays up quite often crying and weeping over his wife that is now deceased, may God rest her soul. But there's a joy because he understands the body can die, but the soul lives forever. And at least what that communicates to me is that he did his very best to care for her soul. But how many of us can say that we do that for our spouse? Do we care, spouses? Do we care for their soul? Do we care for our own soul? Are we caught up in the minutiae? Are we caught up in the material? When I started dating my wife, we were both very active in the gym. Then we had our first child, and then I saw her body start to change. And I didn't know at first, being a newly married guy, young man, not knowing what the heck I was doing, and in a lot of ways still not knowing what the heck I'm doing right now, 3 kids later, but I didn't know what to do with that. Until we realized one day upon our return to the Catholic faith that our marriage was invalid. We got married outside of the church. And I had a discussion with a good priest, my beautiful priest at my Latin Mass. And he said, well, you have to get your marriage convalidated. And therefore, unless you want to live like brother and sister, meaning not coming together in marriage in the marital embrace and just living like your friends, you're in mortal sin. You have to abstain from the sacraments, or you abstain from the marital embrace, from intimacy, and you continue to partake in the sacraments until your marriage is convalidated. That was a difficult choice because, of course, like many men, I was ruled by my flesh, but I had this deep desire for the Eucharist and to be intimately united with Christ and to walk in faithful obedience. It was that moment that I decided to abstain, that the way that I looked at my wife completely changed forever. And this is something that I highly recommend all married couples do, regardless of their status of their marriage. Hopefully, if you are married in the church, I think a powerful spiritual exercise, if you will, not to reduce it down to exercise, is to agree upon a certain period of time of abstinence. Why? So you can grow in love of the person. The gift that is the person's soul, not just what their bodies can do for you in this carnal, temporal sense. And as soon as I made that commitment, wanting to be that example for my daughters, wanting to be that example to my wife and wanting to love her in a completely different way, something that's truly skin deep, that I fell in love with her in a completely different way. I looked at her smile and her eyes completely differently, the way that she laughed, what she does for me, how faithful she is to our household, how faithful she is to me, how good she is to me. I started to love aspects of her personality that I probably had long overlooked because I got lost in the hustle and bustle of life. And things that we tend to ignore because, a lot of guys are ruled by their sexual appetites. But when you agree upon this time, you're able to look at this person for the person made in the image and likeness of God, for who they were created to be. It's a true love that's on a spiritual, soul deep kind of level. And even through that, I've seen my wife's body change through 3 children and going through certain traumas and difficulties in dealing with certain things postpartum. And if I was so wrapped up in the carnality of just pure eros, this romantic sort of desire, this attraction, that I would have probably grown resentful because a person's body is going to change. But instead, by the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, I've come to be more attracted to her than I've ever been before, regardless of bodily and physical changes, regardless of what I've seen in the hospital or at home doing a home birth. There's something deeper than what I just see in my wife in the flesh. I see this person whom soul and heart I love, not just her physical beauty. It exists far beyond that. And so, although I haven't had this incredible confrontation with that, like Dr. Peter Kreeft, and seeing his, my goodness, deceased wife's body, saying that it's more beautiful than a crucifix, I can't even imagine. C.S. Lewis talked about the 4 different kinds of love. And I think in our modern culture, I think we're stuck at one specific dimension. There's 4 dimensions, and I think we're stuck in one of them. I'll just kind of go over them briefly here. Number 1 is storges. It's affection, natural familial affection. That's, comfort, familiarity, the quiet love of everyday life. The coffee every morning, the folding of laundry, knowing her order, holding hands, growing in sort of this filial friendship, this friendship type of affection and bond. The marriage that is built on like the ordinary Tuesday. Just natural affection. The second is philia. So that is the true friendship, the love between companions pursuing a common good. So now your spouse becomes your closest friend. It's not just about affection. Now you have this kind of this intimacy that is developing, long conversations, praying together, having this shared mission, laughter, enjoying each other's company. If the attraction of the romance were to go away, would you still be friends with your spouse? That's a good question. I don't think a lot of guys would, because I don't think they've nurtured that aspect of their marriage enough. They haven't watered their marital garden, so to speak. And so it is, and you see a lot of stuff online where it's your wife should not be your best friend. I think it's so stupid. It's so silly. My closest friend in my life, my companion, my ride or die is my wife. That does not mean I treat her like one of my guy friends and I burden her with everything that's going on with me internally. No, I've got to bear that weight as a man in my home. I've got to bear that weight, have those shoulders, so she doesn't have to bear something that she doesn't need to. Because God knows, good and faithful wives and mothers have a lot to do to begin with. It's not to say she doesn't hear about these things on occasion, so she knows how to pray for me. She knows how to show up for me, but it's a different kind of friendship. But it is a friendship. Don't let anything on the internet, anything you hear on the internet, tell you otherwise. It is your most intimate friendship. My wife is my best friend. Period. And if all the romance were to fade, I would still love her because she's a beautiful person. She's a beautiful soul. I don't just love what she can do for me. I love the person that she is. The next dimension is eros. It's romantic love. This is where I think many people get stuck here in the modern culture, right? The desire that delights in the beauty of another, right? So this is good. This is holy. This is created by God, but it is also incomplete. And we'll get to that fourth dimension in a second. But, imagine, Adam's first words, the Song of Songs. So obviously attraction matters. Of course it does. Don't let anybody also tell you otherwise. Like, attraction matters. We should, keeping ourselves healthy so we remain attractive to our spouses. That's important. Romance matters. The body is good. We are not Manichaeans. The body is not to be hated. It is a good, and God created people to be beautiful and to be attracted to one another. That's good. But to Dr. Peter Kreeft's point, what happens when that beauty fades? What happens when you see your wife's body go through the stages of postpartum, of pregnancy, of having those stretch marks, of seeing her in a light where you've never seen her before? What happens when gray hair or hair starts to fall out, or surgery or cancer, God forbid, or hospital beds? What happens then? This is why Eros is an immature, undeveloped, incomplete dimension of love. It's a dimension, but we have to ascend to the final dimension, which we're about to get into. I don't think men, because a lot of us are guilty of not watering the garden that is our marriage. Not taking our wives out on dates, not learning her temperament, how she best receives love. Does she like physical affection, words of affirmation? Does she, does she like to receive gifts? A lot of men don't even know what their wife's temperaments are, and they wonder why they go through years and years and years, and they feel like they're clashing because a marriage that's devoid of any kind of intimacy is one that just fades and it erodes. And so that's another thing, men, if you don't know your wife's temperament, how she best receives love, my man, what are you doing? Because I can pretty much guarantee, because women are more intuitive when it comes to this, she knows how you receive love. And women, if you don't know how your husband receives love, and I'm going to tell you, most men receive it in a pretty simple way. Respect us. Tell us that we're doing a great job, that you're proud of us, and tell us that you love us. That's it. Doesn't have to be anything crazy. When my wife says that she's proud of me, that she's so grateful for what I do for her, and she comes up to me and just randomly hugs me, man, that's more than enough. I don't require a whole lot. And that's most guys. Most men are pretty simple. They want to be respected and appreciated. But then, a lot of guys on the other end have no idea who their wives actually are. And so I can recollect there's been phases in my marriage where I'm like, did I actually even kiss my wife today? Did I tell her that she was beautiful? Did I try to make her laugh? Did I hug her? Did I touch her? Because, man, that's how marriages just grow cold. There's no nurturing of that bond, no nurturing of the person. And then we expect at the end of the day, all right, babe, let's come together in marriage. And then so you want what you want, and she wants that too, but it's completely different, a man's attraction or libido is like a light switch. It's on and off. Pick, pick. We're very easy. We're very simple that way, where woman is more like a thermostat, but what happens earlier on in the day dictates whether or not she even wants to do that or has the desire to do that later on. This is where romance comes into play. And it's important to know because most guys are just completely clueless when it comes to that. And thus the dead bedroom syndrome happens, right? So in the final dimension of love is agape, self-giving love, the unconditional willing of another's good. Think about the love of Christ, the cross and self-sacrifice, loving when it feels impossible to love, forgiving when your heart wants to do anything but forgive, caring through illness and postpartum, sleepless nights, possibly Alzheimer's, hospice, funeral. It's the giving of yourself when you almost feel like you've got nothing else to give. It's almost like a race to the bottom. But that is the love that Christ has shown us. That if it was just any one of us as the last person on planet Earth, he would have still given up his life and drained himself of every last drop of blood like he did. That is the example, not just merely a metaphor, but to imitate Christ is to love without condition, is to love without boundaries or limits, and to love without any sort of expectation of reciprocity, that it is purely self-gift and the giving of yourself to your spouse. Like he gave himself willingly up for his bride. Now, kind of reflecting back on, Dr. Peter Kraft, he was standing beside her body, and gone was her youth, her beauty, her strength, any sort of conversation or intimacy. Yet he loved her more. How is that possible? Because he had spent decades moving from eros toward agape. He wasn't primarily loving her body, because if that was the case, there would be no falling in love again after seeing her deceased body. He was loving the person. And that body had always been revealing someone greater in his wife. Death may have touched her body, but death never touched what he loved most, was her soul. And this is precisely what is so perverse about fornication and pornography and self-abuse. It's the pleasure detached from the self-gift, where like the language remains, but the beloved disappears. And this is precisely why that is the way that the devil militates against marriage, because he doesn't want us to get to that fourth dimension of agape. He wants us to stay within this carnal temporal pleasure. He wants to fool us into thinking that we can have the gift without the self-gift. And let's be perfectly clear, the church is not anti-sex. The church is absolutely pro-love. The body speaks a language, and the marital embrace says, I give myself entirely. But now compare that to the cheap substitute of fornication, of pornography, of self-abuse, body separated from the person, merely just consumption. Consumption, not communion. It's the pleasure detached from the self-gift. And so back to marriage. Every marriage, every authentic marriage embraces and renews vows again and again and again. And this has got nothing to do with feeling and everything to do with the gift, that communion of persons in love. And to refer to scripture for a second, Ephesians 5, Christ did not love because we were beautiful. He loved to make us beautiful, to redeem us, and to deliver us from our ugliness. Marriage is the school of agape. And your spouse is one of God's greatest instruments for your sanctification. That's why I call it white martyrdom. It's this long, drawn out process that when you are paying attention and you can unite it to the cross and you can show up the way that Christ showed up for us, this is how we attain our crown of glory in the life to come. So what you saw in that clip with Dr. Peter Kraft was not a goodbye, right? But he realized what 50 years of grace had accomplished. That wasn't bigger emotions or higher levels of attraction. It was a deeper love. It was agape. That we are meant to, as men, be the mini Christ in our home, meaning that we pour ourselves out at the altar of the domestic church. And that starts with our spouses. That doesn't mean God, then kids, then self. No, it's God, the care of oneself, and then your spouse. That person whom you said till death do us part. When your kids are long gone out of the home, there's no toys scattered everywhere. There's no mess to clean up. There's no screaming, but you're left with this person who gave themselves to you and who you are supposed to give yourself up to as well. This is why the devil wants to destroy marriage. It is a living, breathing embodiment of Christ and his church, of the Holy Trinity, of the Holy Family. That if he can distort it and twist it and invert it, that's how he can reign supreme in our culture. That's why we live in a Tinder culture, a swipe right, swipe left, pornography, fornication. It all attacks the heart of society. And that heart of society, fundamentally, is marriage. The world tells us to find someone beautiful enough to love. Christianity teaches us to love someone so faithfully that when beauty fades, love has become more beautiful than beauty ever was. That's it. God bless you, and I'll catch you next week.
While your doctrinal accidents, heresy, advocates, fractured explosion, Novena lamb in the secular killer, radical soldiers, dogmatically accurate, Vatican graduate chapel.
Thank you so much for listening to the Radio Maria podcasts. It's thanks to listeners like you who donate that enable us to continue delivering quality content to listeners around the world. If you'd like to contribute and help us keep spreading the message of Our Lady's Son, please consider making a donation. You can reach us at 888-408-0201 or simply visit our donations tab on our website at radiomaria.us. Your generosity truly makes a difference. This has been a Radio Maria production.